The following events took place over the course of 4 days in late October 2024 across rural West Virginia and the backroads of Ohio. I'm posting this here because the police in Kanawha County have basically stopped taking my calls, and I haven't slept in a bed for more than 2 hours at a time since this started. I just need to get the timeline down before I lose my mind. It started at a Sunoco station off Highway 64. I was driving my 2018 Honda Civic from Richmond to Columbus to visit my sister. It was around 11:30 p.m. The station was one of those old, dimly lit places where the fluorescent lights hum loud enough to give you a headache. I was pumping gas when I noticed a white late-model Ford Transit van parked at the far edge of the lot, near the wood line. The engine was idling, no lights on, just a vibrating white shape, in the dark. I didn't think much of it until I went inside to buy a coffee. The cashier, a guy in his 50s with a permanent scowl, didn't even look at me. He was staring past my shoulder at the window. I turned around. The white van had moved. It was now parked directly behind my Civic, blocking me in. I felt that first hit of adrenaline. I paid for the coffee, walked out, and stood by my driver's side door. The van's windows were tinted pitch black. I couldn't see the driver. I waited for 10 seconds. Nothing. No movement. I cleared my throat and waved my hand, signaling them to move. The van just sat there, engine purring. I tapped on their passenger window. Still nothing. I was getting frustrated, but then the driver's side window rolled down, maybe 2 inches. I smelled something sour, like old milk and wet copper. A voice, very low and raspy, said, "You dropped something back there." Elias. My blood turned to ice. My name is Elias, but I haven't used it in years. Everyone calls me Eli, and I hadn't dropped a thing. I backed away, tripped over the curb, and scrambled into my car. I didn't care about the van blocking me. I threw it in reverse, slammed the gas, and swerved around them through the grass, bottoming out my car with a sickening metal screech. I hit the highway doing 90. I checked my rearview mirror every 5 seconds. For 10 miles, nothing. Then, 2 pinpricks of light appeared. They weren't closing in fast, just maintaining distance. I took an exit I didn't recognize near Hurricane, West Virginia, hoping to lose them. I pulled into a closed-down Dairy Queen parking lot and killed the lights. 5 minutes passed, then 10. I started to breathe again. I reached for my coffee, but my hand froze. My phone, sitting in the cup holder, lit up with a text from an unknown number. It was a photo. A grainy, high-angle shot of the top of my head while I was standing at the Sunoco register 3 minutes prior. The caption read, "The coffee is going to get cold, Elias. We're at the bridge now." I looked up, and there, sitting at the intersection 30 yards away, was the white van. Its headlights flickered once. Then it turned left, toward the only bridge leading back to the main road. I didn't go toward the bridge. I pulled a U-turn and drove deeper into the residential back streets, my heart hammering against my ribs. I ended up in a small, quiet neighborhood of 1950s ranch-style houses. It was nearly 1 a.m. I parked in a driveway of a house that looked empty. No lights, overgrown lawn, and stayed low in my seat. I called 911. The dispatcher was calm. Almost too calm. She told me a cruiser was in the area. 20 minutes later, a Ford Explorer with a light bar pulled into the street. Relief flooded me. I jumped out of my car, waving my arms. The cruiser slowed down and stopped, but as I walked toward it, I realized something was wrong. The police decals on the side were peeling, and the light bar was an older model. The window rolled down. It wasn't a cop. It was a man in a tan work shirt with no badge. He looked at me with a blank, wide-eyed expression. He didn't say a word. He just held up a handheld police scanner that was emitting high-pitched static. Behind him, in the back seat, I saw a pile of clothes. My clothes. a blue flannel shirt I had lost at a laundromat 3 weeks ago in Richmond. I backed away, my stomach churning. "Where did you get that?" I whispered. The man didn't answer. I turned and bolted back to my Civic. As I peeled out, I saw the police car turn around. It wasn't following me fast. It was just pacing. I drove for 2 hours, crossing the state line into Ohio. I found a Motel 6 near Gallipolis. I checked in under a fake name, paid cash, and went straight to room 114. I locked the deadbolt, the chain, and pushed the heavy dresser in front of the door. I finally drifted off around 4 a.m. I woke up at 6:15 a.m. to a sound, a wet, sliding sound. It was coming from the door. Someone was sliding something under it. A series of Polaroids slid across the carpet one by one. The first was of my car. The second was of the motel office. The third was a photo of me, asleep on the bed, taken from the perspective of the bedside window. I ran to it and tore it open. The parking lot was empty. My car was gone. In its place stood the white Ford Transit van. The back doors were wide open, revealing a small wooden chair bolted to the floor in the center of the cargo area. There was a Polaroid camera sitting on the chair. My phone buzzed. A new text. "You look peaceful when you sleep, but the chair is more comfortable. Come out or we come in through the crawl space." That's when I heard it. A heavy thud, coming from directly beneath the floorboards of my room. I didn't think. I grabbed my bag and shoved the dresser away. I sprinted out into the morning fog, not toward the van, but toward the woods behind the motel. I ran until my lungs burned. I stayed in a drainage pipe for 6 hours. Around noon, I hit a small gas station. I used their landline to call my sister. No answer. I called the police again. The officer on the line paused. "Sir," he said, "we found a phone inside that car. It was a burner phone logged into a private server. It was broadcasting a live video feed of you right now." I looked up. In the corner of the deli, near the ceiling, was a small black security dome. It was pointing directly at me. I hung up and ran. I saw a black SUV across the street. A man was standing next to it, holding a tablet. He looked up, smiled, and waved. Wasn't the man from the van. It was a different man. He started walking toward me, a steady, confident pace. I've been in this cornfield for 2 days now. Every time I try to head toward the main road, I hear a whistle, forcing me back. This morning, I found my backpack on a stump. Inside was a fresh sandwich, a bottle of water, and a new Polaroid. It's a photo of my sister's house in Columbus. The front door is wide open. On the back, it says, "The family is waiting, Elias. Stop making us chase you. It's time to come home." I can hear the white van idling nearby. My phone battery is at 4%. I can see the silhouette of a man standing at the edge of the trees, holding a long nylon rope. He hasn't moved in an hour. I think I'm going to try to run when the sun goes down, but I don't think there's anywhere left to go. Don't stop for anything. They've been planning this for a long time. I think I was always supposed to end up in the chair. It was exactly 2 a.m. The silence of the California night was heavy. It pressed down on my small apartment. The air was still, suffocating. I was drowning in a deep sleep, the kind of exhaustion that comes after a long, brutal work week. Then, suddenly, everything collapsed. A series of desperate, violent bangs, mad pounding that shattered the sacred silence. It was a sharp, wooden sound, rapid, relentless. It wasn't just a knock, it was a struggle to get in. Something desperate was trying to escape the outside. I woke up with a paralyzed body, a confused mind, heavy eyes. The fatigue was pulling me down, but the fear was dragging me out of bed. I moved slowly through the dark hallway toward the door. Every step felt like an eternity. Shadows in the corners of the apartment shifted. They played tricks on my exhausted brain. I reached the door. The pounding stopped the moment I got close. A suspicious silence took its place. The air behind the door sounded like it was breathing with difficulty. I placed my trembling hand on the cold knob. I opened the door slowly. A tall man stood there. He was wearing a California State Police uniform, but he didn't look like any officer I'd ever seen. His face was pale as ash. His eyes were sunken, hidden beneath his hat, leaving behind a deep, hollow darkness. His skin looked dry, peeling, like it had been exposed to extreme heat. He didn't smile. He didn't apologize for the intrusion. He asked me in a dead voice, cold, empty of any emotion, a voice that sounded like it came from a distant, dark place. "Are you George Mitchell?" I nodded slowly. My mind was trying to make sense of it. There was no police car behind him, no flashing lights, just the darkness. He said to me, "You need to come with me immediately, Mitchell. A horrific car accident. Your coworker, Mark Johnson. He's at the county morgue." The shock froze the blood in my veins. Mark? I just talked to him yesterday. I got into the car with him in a deadly silence. It was a very long trip. The officer didn't say a single word. He just stared straight ahead. The California streetlights reflected off his face. It made his dead skin look like burnt wax. We arrived at a cold, ugly building, the county morgue. The smell inside was suffocating, a mix of foul disinfectants, frozen blood, death and decay, a smell I will never forget. We went down the stairs to a cold basement. The air was frozen and desolate. The coroner was waiting for us. His features looked familiar, but I couldn't remember where I had seen him before. He looked at me with a suspicious gaze, like he knew something I didn't. He pulled the metal drawer with a sharp, annoying screech. A screech that echoed in the empty basement for seconds. He pulled back the sheet. I screamed inside without a sound. This wasn't the Mark I knew. His face was a crushed mass of mangled flesh and frozen blood. His features had completely disappeared under the trauma. His eyes were missing, as if a hungry entity had ripped them out from the inside, with a sharp tool, with unimaginable brutality. His jaw was shattered. It was slid to the left in an unnatural way, leaving behind a black, terrifying gap instead of his mouth. There were clear human bite marks on his neck and chest, marks that looked like sharp teeth, marks that proved his death was an ordinary accident. It was a brutal attack. Something had gotten to him, something hungry that knew no mercy. The mutilations looked human, inflicted by a human hand, reflecting a massive, hateful rage. I nodded in pure shock. Yes, this is Mark. It was all over. The wounds on Mark's body began to move slowly, opening and closing, as if they were breathing with difficulty, as if they were trying to speak, like they carried a message for me. The frozen blood began to melt. It flowed from the wounds, dropping to the floor slowly, forming a red, terrifying circle under the metal drawer. Shadows in the room began to gather and dance around the body, drawing creepy shapes on the cold walls, reflecting a horror that words cannot describe. The officer and the coroner were staring at me in a suspicious silence. Their eyes hid a terrifying look, a look that seemed to know the tragic end waiting for me. Horror was surrounding me from everywhere. There was no escape. The end had already begun. I went back to my apartment, but I wasn't alone anymore. The silence that used to comfort me became my enemy. Every small sound felt like a scream. Things started the next night. I was standing in the kitchen, trying to make coffee. Suddenly, I heard a sound behind me. A sharp, metallic screech. It sounded exactly like a morgue drawer being opened. I froze. The smell began to fill the room. The smell of rotten meat, formaldehyde, and death. I turned around quickly with a knife in my hand. I found no one. But the refrigerator door was wide open. There was a thick, black liquid dripping from the inside. It looked like old, clotted blood. I looked inside. There was no food. Only a clear glass bottle filled with a dark red liquid, and pieces of white cloth. Cloth that looked like the shroud that covered Mark's body. My hands shook. I slammed the fridge shut. I heard a muffled laugh coming from behind the wall. It was Mark's laugh, but it was a laugh choked with blood. I went to the bathroom to wash the cold sweat off my face. The air was dry, but the mirror began to cover with a thick fog, a gray fog coming out of nowhere. I wiped the fog with my hand. I screamed and fell back. I didn't see my face. I saw Mark, standing right behind my shoulder. He was wearing the white morgue gown. The gown was soaked in black morgue fluid. His face was inches away from my ear. I saw his empty eye sockets clearly. They were filled with tiny maggots moving under the dead skin. His shattered jaw was hanging to the left. It moved slowly, up and down. He was trying to whisper something. Nothing came out but a disgusting gurgling sound. Bloody spit fell on my shoulder. I felt its coldness burning my skin. I turned around in shock. There was no one there. I looked at the mirror again. It was shattered into thousands of tiny pieces. The shards didn't fall to the floor. They hung in the air for a moment. Then they fell to form one word on the floor. Mark. I fled to the bedroom and locked the door. I sat on the bed, trembling. Suddenly, I heard violent banging. It was coming from inside my closet, rhythmic pounding, heavy, like the sound of a heart stopping. The closet door opened very slowly. A pale hand reached out, completely mangled. The fingernails had been ripped from their roots. The skin was peeling off like charred paper. The hand began to crawl on the floor toward me. It left a black trail behind it. Then the head emerged. Mark was crawling on the floor, moving like an insect with broken bones. He reached the edge of the bed. He dug his cold fingers into my ankle. I screamed at the top of my lungs, but no one heard me. The walls of the apartment began to bleed that same black liquid. The pictures on the walls flipped upside down. My family's faces in the photos turned into Mark's mangled face. The clock struck 3 a.m. The devil's hour. Mark sat on the edge of my bed. His weight was real. I felt the mattress sink under his dead weight. He placed his shattered hand on my chest. I felt the morgue's coldness pierce my heart. He began to whisper in a voice like bones rubbing together. He said to me, "Why did you leave me, George? The drawer is so tight, and the maggots are hungry." I tried to get up, but my body was paralyzed. Real, terrifying sleep paralysis. I started to see other faces appearing on the ceiling. Pale faces, eyes sewn shut with black thread. They were looking at me, pointing. They said one word: sacrifice. Mark was no longer just a spirit. He became an entity dragging me to the grave. The air in the room was gone. I was breathing in the smell of Mark's decay. The life I knew ended in that moment, and the journey of endless horror began. Weeks passed. I wasn't the George you knew. I lost my job. I lost my appetite. I lost an alarming amount of weight. My eyes were sunken. The dark circles around them looked like bruises from another world. I could no longer tell the difference between a dream and reality. The spirit became more aggressive, stronger. Mark wasn't satisfied with just appearing. He started to touch my body. He began leaving physical marks. One night, it was 3 a.m. I felt a massive pressure on my chest, pressure that breaks ribs. I opened my eyes. Mark's mangled face was inches from mine. The smell of sulfur and decay was coming from his mouth. A smell that makes you want to vomit until you die. He dug his cold fingers into my neck. I felt his broken nails pierce my skin. I saw the human bite marks appearing on my shoulder right before my eyes. Blood was pouring out. I screamed, but the sound died in my throat. I fled the apartment. I took nothing with me. I got into my car and drove like a madman through the dark streets of California. I wanted to escape the shadow, but he appeared everywhere. I looked in the car mirror. I saw Mark sitting in the back seat. He was smiling with his shattered jaw. I screamed and smashed the mirror with my hand. I reached a cliff overlooking the Pacific Ocean. I stood on the edge. The cold wind slapped my face. I looked down at the black waves. Suddenly, the ground began to shake beneath my feet. It wasn't an earthquake. Thousands of pale hands were emerging from the dirt. Mangled hands, fingernails ripped off. They grabbed my feet with force, pulling me down. It wasn't just Mark's hand. It was other spirits. Their faces were crushed in the same hideous way. Eyes missing. Mouths sewn shut with rusty wires. I felt the morgue's coldness surrounding my entire body. I heard Mark's voice whisper in my ear, a wet, fluid voice. "There's room for one more in the drawer, George. We're all waiting for you." I looked down again. I didn't see the ocean water. I saw something impossible. A massive metal morgue drawer, open in the middle of the darkness. A pale, dead white light was coming from it. The coroner and the officer were standing by the drawer. They were looking at me, signaling for me to come. Suddenly, I felt a powerful shove against my back. There was no one behind me, but I flew into the air. Gravity disappeared. I was falling toward that open metal drawer. I let out one last scream that tore my vocal cords. Right before my body slammed against the cold metal, I heard the sharp screech, the screech of the drawer slamming shut. I woke up, or so I thought. I found myself in a completely dark place, very tight. I can't move my hands or feet. The air is unbearably cold. The smell is formaldehyde. I try to scream, but my mouth is sewn shut with thick black thread. I feel something moving on my face. Maggots. Tiny, hungry maggots. Suddenly, I heard a scratching sound from the other side, fingernails on metal. Then, I heard his voice, Mark's voice, laughing beside me in the dark. "Now you know the truth, George. We don't die. We just wait for someone to open the door." I felt his nails beginning to dig their way into my chest, not from the outside, from the inside. And worst of all, I began to smile. I felt my facial muscles twitching, creating that shattered smile. The smile that doesn't belong to me. The smile that belongs to the neighbor in the next grave. The end wasn't death. The end is becoming one of them. Forever.